welcome everybody in a fully packed Pakhuis de Zwijger. So welcome everybody here in the audience. Welcome also everybody that's watching from home or anywhere else. It's also being broadcasted. So we have lots of people here, John, today to be a part of your book presentation.
Great.
John is with me. More about John later, much more later. First, let me do a small introduction. My name is Indira van het Klooster. I'll be your host, your moderator for tonight. And tonight we'll be talking about reconnecting with China, where architecture meets reflection. Architecture, as we all know, is not a practice that operates in isolation. Architecture reflects culture, social values, and objectives. Architecture promises ideals, creating cities for the future, designing for a better world. But how do those ideals hold up in a time of fragmentation and friction? That's basically the question that started this whole book. And in this book, Reconnecting with China, John van der Water shows how building in China is never only about China, but also about ourselves, our cities, and our future. I'm very happy to host this night because first thing I knew about John was his first book. It's also here. It's also for sale. You can't chase China. China changes you. And basically, that tells the whole story of how John is actually looking at himself, at China, at the Netherlands, at the practice of being an architect. So that will be the topic of today. For a better introduction of John graduated from Delft University with a Master of Architecture degree in 1999. In the same year, he founded with 3 friends Next Architects in Amsterdam, moved to China in 2004 after traveling the world for 4 months, visiting 26 cities all around the world. Until then, Next Architects had not realized one single building. By 2005, Next office in China had realized over 1 million square meters of built work on Chinese soil, making Next Architects one of the largest Dutch firms in China. In 2012, he published the book, You Can't Chase China, China Changes You, as I mentioned earlier. And still, I really think so. It's one of the best books ever written by an architect. So please read it, buy it. Yes, it is. It actually is. Wow. Since 2012, let's say, building in China and building in the Netherlands may seem worlds apart, but they are not, and then they are. In 2012, John said, I'm in China because of scale and speed. In 2026, he said, I would now choose the word coherence. China is a mirror and the horizon. A mirror to see yourself better, an horizon to see distance and direction. John is an architect, but also a profound thinker. So be welcome to this night full of John, full of China, and full of reflection. John, the floor is yours.
Wow. Wow, thank you, Indira. Some introduction. Thank you. So my combined Dutch-Chinese modesty now is kicking in. So thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here. It's great to see so many people. I've been looking forward to this evening. It's been quite a struggle to finish the second book. The whole world changed after the first book. I did it with, of course, with a lot of input, not only from what I experience, but with the people I work together with, I cooperate with, the people I meet in everyday life. So I'm very happy to introduce this second book to you now and to later on have a conversation with other people here on the floor as well. I'm not very happy that our Chinese partner, Jiang Xiaofei, was not able to make it tonight. So he says sorry and he says hello at the same time. There are 3 questions I asked him to introduce himself and to introduce us here to you as the audience. We can briefly go through the questions and the answers from him. So the first question was, what has changed in the way you and John work together after more than 20 years?
I don't know any Chinese and Western architect partners that still work together so long. Maybe it's because our ways of working is a little special. We don't need too many words. In fact, my English is not good because John never really gave me opportunity to improve it. He can already understand me with a few words. The same for his Chinese. Many times we just need half sentences to know what the other means. Some clients and visitors feel this is very strange, but we are proud of this kind of understanding. After more than 20 years, our cooperation only becomes stronger and we trust each other more. Of course, now the world become much more complicated than before. As architects, we feel strong responsibility, so we can't only feel happy with what we already achieved. We must keep thinking how to improve, not only as partners, but also as friends.
So which project was the moment you understood each other best?
We designed hundreds of projects together, so it's very difficult to choose one project. Sometimes our different ways of thinking come close together very quickly. Sometimes it's far away from a long time. But important is we both keep learning from every project. John calls our way of working idea ping pong, ideas moving very fast between us. I call it more like an ongoing translation. Sometimes the source of an idea slowly disappears. Maybe it started from something I said, and John changed it into a sketch. But maybe the real beginning of the idea was already much earlier in our cooperation. I think this is also something special in our office. The final design often no longer feels like it belongs to one person only, but it comes out of many meetings, misunderstandings, changes, and working together for a long time.
And the final question, do you think John sometimes sees China too much through Western eyes?
In China, a foreigner always needs to keep trying to understand something he will never completely understand. John knows this limitation, and maybe that's why he keeps trying to understand. Because he has lived in China for such a long time, he was also able to see many changes happening inside China's society. But even for Chinese people, it's sometimes difficult to understanding how fast China is changing. And for Western people, maybe even more difficult. Sometimes John still looks at China too much as a Western architect. But this is good, because he can never become Chinese. I think his advantage is that he can see China both from the outside and from inside at the same time. This distance sometimes creates misunderstandings because it also allows him to see something that people inside China no longer see so clearly.
So this is 3 minutes and 3 answers. And of course, there's an incredible amount of meetings and talking and traveling and working together behind these 3 minutes. And I would briefly like to introduce these kind of stories that happen behind the answers here. Taking everybody back to 1999, this image that intrigued me most when I graduated as a student from Delft University, looking at the world from above, seeing a world that was very promising, without any borders, with urbanization as still like some promising transformative force that was making the world better. And this is something that I wanted to work in as an architect, such an ideal kind of condition. But in order to work in such a world, you need to be, you need at least try to understand what this world means. So this is the foundation of the office that we started together with the three friends that Indira just mentioned. The very first project we did together, trying to plan a trip along 26 of the biggest cities on Earth, trying to understand what the influence of globalization was on the way cities developed around the world. This was a very naughty project that we started, but the very foundation, I think, or one of the foundations under our office, a very research-driven kind of approach, and try to look beyond the borders of what architecture actually is. This is the final result, or one of the final results. And we dissected the image of the metropolis in many, many different themes, which you are able to compare on a horizontal level. And vertically, you can have a snapshot of the city just at the end of the millennium. This travel was the first time that I actually visited China. And already at that point, I was really grasped not only by the assignment that China was looking at, the ambition that it was already starting to show towards the outside world, but also the idea that it wanted to find an own direction in this reconnecting with the world that was going on. We came back to Amsterdam, we started our own office, and we, like the Dutch newspaper here said, we were starting to live a boy's dream. I hope, and I need to check with the partners in a moment whether we're still living this boy's dream. I still try to do it. It's at least the ambition. And in 2002, I came back with this project at the Tsinghua University in Beijing, showing the results of this research trip. And at that point, after the lecture I had over there, some professors just whispered in my ear and told me, you know, why don't you come to China? We can build many towers together. But India, I already mentioned earlier, we didn't have any reference-built projects whatsoever, so we didn't know how to build. We just had big ideas. So it was a bit too early, but it felt already immediately afterwards as a missed opportunity. So until 2004, there was suddenly on a Monday morning an email in my email box asking whether we were interested to participate in the Olympic Games. I needed just a split second, of course, to make a decision whether we were interested or not. But not trying to be too eager, I waited just about 10 minutes before replying, yes, we are interested. You know, architects are a very hungry species, especially when these kind of opportunities are in front of you. We didn't get selected for this competition because basically we still didn't have any build portfolio. But the idea was already there. If the opportunity is there, why wait for a next one? Why just don't go there and try to figure it out on the spot? So I found a partner, a local partner in Beijing, and this is the first group picture of our offices together. I'm the guy in the circle, that's next. And all the other colleagues are from the Chinese office. There's like 140 colleagues, and there's a little imbalance between the way we started cooperating. And especially this imbalance was something that provided some kind of energy. You know, why should I come here and tell you something? What can I actually, or where's my added value? We landed in 2004 in what I, in retrospect, call the Beijing welcomes you period. And the period before, these are like 5 kind of periods that I reconstructed writing this second book. The period before is opening up, and I think everybody here knows in the meanwhile that this is initiated by Deng Xiaoping, who opened the doors and the windows to the world. And through these doors, the first Western architects also stepped and were invited to build with China or for China. And 2001 was an amazing year, of course, because then something started that fundamentally changed at least Beijing, but in many different other Chinese cities as well. Beijing was awarded Olympic Games in 2008. And from that moment, we all know the media articles that China completely transformed. So there was this amazing urbanization going on. The numbers were like totally incomprehensible for Western people. Beijing started building more than the whole of Europe together in 1 year, and everybody knows these kind of superlatives that just totally amazed Western people looking at China. A lot of foreign architecture offices came to China, but a lot of young architects as well went there, especially after the global financial crisis hit the European and the Western markets. and suddenly all the opportunities appeared to be in China, and everything was happening in China. We started, of course, 4 years before the global financial crisis, but we had the same question that all these architects and all these offices had coming to China, and that is, how can you work there? So where is actually your added value? And before we went, we drew this scale comparison, and it completely made us realize that, you know, in a country like Holland, which of course is a very important country, but if you just compare the scale, you're totally out of scale. And the second picture is an image of the airport map, or the map in the seat in front of my airplane seat. And I was looking at this map, and then I saw all these cities that I never heard of and I never learned anything about when I was studying. So I saw this city Loyang, and there weren't any architecture books, so I opened The Lonely Planet, and I discovered that in the early and the mid-Tang dynasty already over 1 million people were living there. And that at that time, Rome disappeared, and we didn't have any European cities of that scale. So what can I actually do as a Western architect working in such an enormous scale in a country that has such an incredibly long history? So I found myself in an in-between condition, in between Western architects that visited Beijing at the time, looking at something that was impossible to build and to think and to plan in their own countries. And on the other side, an insatiable real estate market in China where everybody was thinking, I need to buy, because if I don't buy now, I'm missing out opportunities. This in-between condition was much broader. So we found ourselves as a very young office. I still was like one foreigner, then it became 2 foreigners. Found ourselves in competitions between the most renowned architecture offices in international offices in the world. So we are like young guys playing Saturday morning football somewhere in the province, and we suddenly had to play Champions League football, which was incredibly difficult. It did something, of course, with your own identity as well, because suddenly my name just turned out to be Johan, and then it was Johan Perter, and then my face changed according with my name. It became Chinese as well, and I sometimes transformed only into a design company. There was all left what of the original identity. And the other thing is that there was a very interesting in-between understanding of logic. So when, for instance, this feng shui expert started to explain me, you know, you should have this department on this floor, and this should be happening there, and you need a painting on the wall there, you need to have so asking and in trying to get in conversation with this expert, he suddenly just abruptly closed the conversation because, you know, you cannot understand this, you're a Westerner, which was, of course, very difficult because I was trying to and I wanted to understand. So I started working from this in-between condition, working, building, planning, and then getting acquainted with the idea that in China sometimes construction starts before planning is finished. And this is the beginning of the roller coaster that Indira just described earlier. Only possible because of the incredible amount of kilometers traveled, visiting people, meeting people, seeing different places, trying to put every bit of energy in trying to understand more. So this is like for the first 10 years, traveling over 1 million kilometers in China alone, trying to visit every place and trying to meet as many people as possible. It resulted in this diagram, which we probably now wouldn't make again, an unprecedented amount of different projects, not only in scale, but also in different typologies and all kind of things that we never worked on before we came to China. And it resulted, the stories behind these projects resulted in the first book, You Cannot Change China, China Changes You. In it, I try to not only describe what I experienced myself, but also what it means being a Western foreigner in a completely different cultural context, and what you need to learn and unlearn and relearn in order to be able to do something for the local context that you are working in. In the end of this book, the cooperation stopped with the Chinese company, and cooperation really started with the partner you just saw earlier, Jiang Xiaofei. And this was the beginning of the years for us working together. The good thing about writing a book is that it offers you a different kind of reflection than, for instance, making a building does. And it was very interesting for me to see that the book that was actually translated in Chinese only was changed 5%, according to Jiang Xiaofei, who translated it. That the same book landed in Dutch reviews talking about surrendering to China, whereas the book in China was much more about building on two cultures. So this spectrum for me was really interesting, because in a sense this is also how we developed our projects, or the point where we started developing from. I want to show you two different projects, our most Western project at the time and what we consider our most Chinese project. This is our most Western project, a pedestrian bridge. In fact, it's 3 bridges in one bridge, and we had a Western ambition to make this more than just a connection, make it actually a space in itself where people can linger and can just stay on the bridge and see it as a public space. And when this sketch went back and forth between the offices, suddenly Chinese colleagues started seeing a lucky nut. So in a kind of strange serendipity, the Chinese Association came up, and this is something we developed further. So these are the images when the bridge was realized, and we were proud for this project in a sense that we were able to combine making the question of the mayor, make it a landmark, and for us making something that actually contributes to the site and to the context where it is actually built. On the other opposite, there's our most Chinese project. This project is a museum dedicated to rose culture, something I didn't know anything about before starting this project. And we started questioning whether the building should be a very Western kind of building or a complete formalistic Chinese kind of building. And we got, in the end, in the process, inspired by Chinese courtyard architecture, with shadow patterns falling down and with paper cut pattern as a way to create this shadow pattern. So this is what the building looks like when it was finished. A building we would never make in Holland, never make somewhere in Europe, but that actually fitted very well in China just because it just got locally appreciated so much. This, in fact, is very interesting that surrendering or building on two different kind of cultures is the question behind it, and that is actually how much influence from China do you allow yourself in the design process or in the way you develop your portfolio. These are the partners in a Beijing visit, and not long after we started working on a new project, and the brief of this project was for a Chinese architect very doable. So for instance, the building height, there's no limitation. And the requirement behind the building itself is it should be splendid, grand, belonging to a rich company. And this is a dream for a Chinese architect, whereas it's a nightmare for a Western architect, because a Western architect can basically only work with constraints, because we are learned to start working and designing from constraints. So I found myself in this in-between position, also communicating with the office back in Amsterdam, because they were asking, what does the client want? And I was saying, he wants everything, which made communication very, very complicated. So this foreignness, this Chineseness in our joint portfolio really became a question. On the left, a project that really is designed and worked with our, like the Chinese say, with our heart, a transformation project of 3 factories into a museum. And on the right, a project that I already can see the faces of my partners, looking at them now, why do you have that picture here, and showing it to everybody, because this is not something that we actually could have designed with our heart, This is designed with, I can tell you now, this is designed with my brain, because in China you sometimes need a project like that to be able to participate in a project like that. Whereas in Europe you are either a cultural architect or you're a commercial architect, and in China you need to be the same and at the same time as well. You need to be both at the same time. So when we are, and then this is something that's still going on between the office in Amsterdam and Beijing, and how do you relate this foreignness in your portfolio? In the meanwhile, not only we as an office allowing more Chinese influence changed, China changed as well. And it happened in 2014 that a pivotal moment was suddenly there, and that was announced that there were no more strange buildings allowed in China. And I was sitting in the morning trying to figure out on the left-hand side when the news message popped up, what does strange mean and why is it not allowed anymore? And I just quickly figured out that strange means, no more strange means buildings should be pragmatic, they should be economical, they should be green, and they should be beautiful. Except for the condition for beautiful, which is very difficult for a Western architect. The other 3 are very doable, because that's also something we consider here. But on the right-hand side, you see several months later already happening that more people were questioning what does this weird mean and how does it relate to innovation and to new architecture. And in the most worst case, what does it mean for Western ideas? So if you would rephrase it, no more Western ideas, then suddenly you question yourself, what can I actually still do as a Western architect? But it also puts some tension between you and your Chinese partner, obviously, because your contribution to what is being developed is suddenly not as valuable anymore. Suddenly at this moment, after 2014, pictures popped up on the walls again during meeting rooms with the local governments, which is a very, very strange experience, because you kind of feel that the conversation is already determined before it actually started. And this is something that made us question, what kind of buildings, what kind of architecture are we building for whom? A very relevant question that maybe is sometimes also experienced in Europe, but it is much more prominent in China. This is not something theoretical, because something happened not very long after, and that is that we worked for over a year non-stop on this project. An opera house that we won the competition together with a Chinese partner. And then the groundbreaking ceremony started to happen, and then suddenly this project was supposed to be a sample project for the friendship between China and Russia, and the project should be a Tchaikovsky opera house. And the Dutch design, which was developed, Dutch-Chinese design was developed over years, suddenly was, taken into a geopolitical context and was supposed to be a sample project. So how do you deal with this as an architect? I'm not giving all the answers here now. The answers are in the book. No, this is not. And completely on the other end of the scale, there's a very prestigious project. This is a pro bono project for rural libraries in earthquake-stricken areas that we designed. And there was a French architect that asked me, you design a beautiful library over there, but how can you control what children are reading in this library? And of course, this puts like if you take responsibility, like Jiang Xiaofei said earlier, that we take as architects, there's a limit to taking responsibility, because you cannot control the result over time like you maybe would like to. It doesn't mean that all the opportunities just completely disappeared. Western ideas didn't have any value anymore, and that the architect just turned into some kind of liability. The Western architect turned into a liability. Absolutely not. This is an example of a project that popped up at the same time. A local mayor, sending a message to us. Sorry, no translation. So my phone number is this. I read John van der Water's book, and then he's explaining that there's a small airport project in his province, and he's interested whether we are interested to participate in this. 3 days later was the first day of Christmas. I was sitting at his desk, and I was explaining him, we never designed an airport before. And then he explained to me, well, this is great, because then China can have the next airport. And this is the beauty of working in China, that you try to understand one side of the medal, but suddenly the other side of the medal is still there, and it offers a lot of possibilities. Not in the last place, because this airport is completely developed for electronic flying and for all kind of innovation in the aviation industry. But still, of course, there's this change. What Xiaofei said earlier, things are getting more complex. And things also get more complex between a Western partner and a Chinese partner, obviously. The privilege that you had before as a Westerner, being there, being taken to meetings, opening doors, suddenly wasn't that obvious anymore. And we started trying to figure out how can we make the world between us, the collective things that we share, how can we increase this world, how can we make it bigger? And we not only try to find it within ourselves, but also outside China. So this is the moment that we started our first projects outside China. On an island in Palau, I'd never heard of the country before. In Angola, we tried something in Amsterdam, and there are different kind of countries. We started also trying to bring this collective Chinese-Dutch thinking and put it into another different context, and try to develop projects there. China kept changing. In 2016, there was the announcement, houses are for living. A very pivotal moment that is very actual in the media here as well. The announcement here was made in 2016, and then already afterwards you could start seeing real estate developers getting into liquidity problems. The idea behind it is basically stopping debt leverage development and make architecture social again. In a sense, stop speculation with architecture. A very beautiful and essential promise, and also something that brought us back now to reconnecting the essence that we should do and what we are working on as architects. And this more or less planted the first idea of writing the second book. So what if the world is changing so quickly, shouldn't we go back to what architecture in essence is about, but also what we are designing together with who and for who. And this is basically what we started doing from 2016. So the whole idea that architecture in itself was a goal, creating these object kind of buildings, making them more bigger, more beautiful, more interesting for our clients. We started getting back to the idea that architecture is much more a mean to achieve different kind of goals. And one of these goals is sustainable development. And the newspaper here, it's a Chinese newspaper, is completely wrong because it's not Dutch experience for sustainable development, but it's definitely the combined experience for sustainable development. So these are the projects we started working on from that moment. The HEAP is here, and Herman is also here. So there's a project we worked on together, like abandoned villages. Can we do something? Can we give a new life to abandoned villages? Because it's a huge challenge of all the people moved from the village to the cities, what to do with all these villages. Regeneration with local communities, all work together with local materials. We started getting involved in bigger projects like post-industrialization. On the left, a mining city. It's a completely broken landscape. The whole industry is gone, and we proposed to introduce a complete new industry, a bamboo industry, and this bamboo industry could make 100,000 jobs for people, like re-educated mining workers, so possible, could create a new industry, and it could actually achieve 15% regional CO2 reduction. Plus, it actually gave the city a new reason to be there. And we worked on a restoration project for nature and restoring the relationship between city and landscape. So here on the left, the situation that it wasn't on the right when the project was finished. Work together with local people, work together with local steel industry, figuring out green steel, really involving people here. More restoration projects for wetlands, for instance, and for other nature projects. So all the things that happened in this incredible amount of development, we try to restore it. And it also gave us the opportunity to repair things that we did, where something happened that we could actually do something with again. On the left is the site where we were asked to design a residential neighborhood. And I tended not to accept this assignment because it was like pristine nature. Whereas Jiang Xiaofei said, if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it, and we can do it better. So it's better for everybody. So some kind of perfect logic that happened. So, and of course, he convinced me with his thinking. So we created this almost this zero carbon neighborhood. But the big problem is that after we started building here on the left, we opened the doors for the big industry and for the real estate giants, creating an environment in just a matter of years where there's this sea of unfinished concrete towers now, symbolizing the real estate winter, as it is called in China. China lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty in just a period of decades by the use also of urbanization. But the backside of this medal is that it is also now the largest CO2 transmitter in the world, and 30% of it is belonging to construction. And we as architects also contributed it to this incredible CO2 emission. So what can we do if you take that into account? And if you know that China in 2030 and 2060 tries to be carbon neutral, you don't see this as a problem, but you can see it as an opportunity. So we started making plans for little cross-laminated timber plug-in units that we could plug into the concrete structures. And we could give young Chinese generation opportunity by having a possibility to create their own home, their own startup company, and sharing the space between these little units on the floors. And of course, they're fully customizable and they're changeable, and to create a problem into an opportunity. And here as well, instead of finishing these towers or demolishing them and being more detrimental to the environment, you actually contribute to the environment as well. 2026 is the thing I'm aiming for in this book. It's the fifth phase, what we call, and it's not something that we try to question. Don't try to question what is happening after this real estate winter, but I'm much more aiming for what would we like, how the world looks like after this real estate winter. And this is still 25 years later from where we started. This is still the image of the world, how it looks like. And of course, it's completely different from when we started 20 years ago. We don't talk about globalization, we talk about deglobalization. We talk about systemic risk, we talk about decoupling, we talk about spheres of influence, we talk about all different kind of things that actually bring people more far away from each other. We talk about architecture and urbanism as still part of the problem rather than of the solution. And I think that regardless of the lens through which you see the world, there's one essential thing that we have in common, and that we should and are able to work together on this. And that is very basically the thing that we have in common that transcends countries, that transcends borders, and that transcends even cultures. Because developments like this don't stop at borders or don't stop at countries and aren't able to be controlled by them. So what do we do to contribute to this development? First of all is to write this book and share it with each and every one of you. It's not a book trying to explain China. It's not a book about differences, but it's a book what tries to show what architecture can do if you work with differences. So this is the first. And the second is we are working on topics that are actually topics that can one-to-one be transplanted into a Dutch context. So nature-inclusive architecture, climate-adaptive gardens and landscape, bio-based buildings, circular construction, working with recycled steel, all different themes that you actually also find in the Dutch profession. And China is working on this as well. We are working with Chinese people on this as well. And China is not waiting for us. China is also giving its own solutions to this kind of development directions. I don't know how long I talked, India. I'm very sorry that this is an architect with pictures. Oh, I can never stop. Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was maybe a bit longer than we anticipated, but actually we loved every word of it, of course. So I'm really happy that you gave us all the questions and also all the answers. So basically we're done for the evening, but I would like to see if we can break this story down into different compartments, because it's such a huge story. And so I thought, the book is called Reconnecting with China. So that means that there must have been a moment of connection, a moment of disconnect, and now you're in the process of reconnecting and trying to figuring out how. So what we're going to do tonight, also for your relief, to see what's going to happen. We're going to talk a bit more about the context of working in China, which is why Gary van Pinksteren also joined us at the table. I will introduce you in a bit, Gary. We are going to talk with fellow architects living in both worlds and talking about what the profession of being an architect is actually like. But before going to the political context of working in China, one more question, because that's where your story started, with the Lucky Knot Bridge and the Rose Museum. And actually, within the book, it may be still the phase that you're trying to connect to China, to figure out your place in these quite complex surroundings. But it's also about a disconnect to your partners in the Netherlands, who love you very much. They're all here with all their parents and friends, so no worries about that. But it's at the exact same time that you were in the running of becoming the Dutch Architect of the Year, and all your beloved partners said, please don't mention China too much. And when you showed them proudly the design for the Rose Museum, there was a kind of complete blank on the other side of the line. So what happened in trying to connect to China and at the same time kind of trying to keep connected to the Dutch context of your office?
It's a very good question. Should we ask one of the guys over there?
Okay, we'll ask them later how they felt. But now, of course, as it's your evening, we want to know how you felt about it.
You can compare the answers. I think the title of the book, Reconnecting with China, is not necessarily we should reconnect with China because there's a disconnection. Reconnecting is much more meant, if you start reading the book, with the essence of what we should do as architects, or going back to something we lost along the way in this development from globalization to deglobalization. What happened to, all the detrimental things we did, questioning what the real value is of the work we should do, but not only ourselves, but we should do it together with China, because we got two completely different systems working on different sides of the world, every system is more or less reaching its own limitations. we're reaching a limitation, China's reaching a limitation, so why not, figure out if we work together on the same kind of topics, look together and see something different that might be able to be used in your own context. So it's not it's a publisher thing, to call it Reconnect and to make it like something. We should reconnect with China itself, but there's actually a layer behind it. And to answer the question about, don't mention China too much, this is something we really still happens every time we have a discussion. Where does the influence begin and where does it stop? And at what kind of point is it helpful for your projects and the way you want to develop in a Dutch context, and the other way around? So if we are working on projects in China that are definitely not good for a Dutch context, but they're still working on the same themes behind these projects. But because it's just too big or too much building architecture for China, it doesn't work in Holland. And you don't need to try to explain it. It's basically that's it. So the project that the Dutch partners in Holland hate, the one on the right-hand side, the big commercial building, the project manager of the client told me, you created something very valuable for China that is impossible in Holland. And I question, of course, what is the value behind it? But that's the value itself is locally, and it's never done by the architect. And how we deal with it, that's the discussions we have among each other. Yeah.
Maybe that's a good moment also to introduce Gary. Because Gary van Pinkster, I'm so glad you're here, because you're a sinologist, a journalist, and a researcher, a university lecturer. You've been involved in China for almost 40 years now, I think, as a reporter for NRC Handelsblad and NOS. But you started coming to China from the 1980s early on as a student, and you are now research fellow at Klingendahl, also doing a PhD on. Are you still doing the PhD? Or
no,
is it finished? No, not
Many things I don't do.
Oh,
anymore.
that's a pity.
Yeah.
We want you to do the PhD, and of course, maybe people in the audience, you may recognize Gary because she was a very interesting zomergast at VPRO Zomergast a few years back, 2 years back. So thank you for being here. And maybe the first question goes to you right away, because you saw the movie with John's partner, with the Nexus partner, basically. He was talking about how fast China is changing, and John also referred to that. So I was wondering, how did you see this video? How did you look at the answers, and how would you respond to that?
I must say I was rather touched by it, and also by your introduction, your story about how your company developed, because you have managed to get a report with your Chinese partner and work together and really create new things there. That is quite exceptional, because usually people can get quite lost on both ways, and it's very rare to see a cooperation between a Chinese and a Dutch partner actually being successful. So I thought that was quite. I also understand why it's possible, why you might have managed to do it, because it does require an openness towards Chinese society and Chinese culture, but also on the other hand, an openness of your partner's side, on your partner's side, to Western culture. And this is something that is very valuable. I mean, it's also, for me personally, being in China has enriched my life tremendously, and I feel that it has given me not one world but two worlds to live in, and that is quite exceptional. And we discuss these days, of course, a lot of geopolitics and a lot of tensions which are actually there, and they do pose very serious questions. I mean, also in relationship, like how can you cooperate, or should you cooperate, or with a Chinese government, or with all the political elements that are there? And there are many questions that you can put there. But it's in a way a shame that we've landed in this situation, and we've actually landed in this situation. I mean, there's real problems and real contradictions, but it takes away the possibility to just simply get enriched by a culture that's very different, and where people have very interesting contributions to make and very interesting thoughts, because I don't know what it's like for you, but I have never been able to predict any answers to my questions. Like then you have a question and you think they're probably going to say this, and then they're going to say something that you've never thought of yourself. And that, I think, is something you would lose if you're not connected somehow. So I am always quite contradicted about that, because I do warn against China in many ways, and I say it's what they're doing now, what the government doing, it's very risky, it's dangerous for us, we should take care. But on the other hand, I do also feel the enrichment that Chinese society has given to me personally.
And before going to the warnings that you make and why you make them, because if China is changing so fast, what are examples of this? Which changes are we talking about, and how do you notice, or how do you get aware of that during while you do your work there?
Well, I think as a journalist, you get to notice that as one of the first groups maybe working in China, because what has changed very much is my access to sources in China. Like, do people still want to talk to me? Are they still able to talk to me? Are they allowed to talk to me? Am I allowed to visit certain places and look around? Or am I stopped by security people? And that, the whole, that has changed tremendously. I mean, the access that you get as a journalist working in China is now so much more limited than it was, for instance, in 2006. So, and also the way you're looked at. I mean, I feel that more people see me now as an enemy, or suppose that my newspaper or my other employers have given me this instruction to report badly, say bad things about China, or that maybe I'm even some sort of spy, and these tensions and these accusations are much. I mean, that has grown exponentially. It's not like slowly. It's really a big change. So I have found it much harder to work there, because you are there to see things and go places, but that has become difficult.
So this distrust, John, is that something that you recognize?
Yeah.
Is it different when you're working there? A journalist, of course, has a different job to do. Has to be more of the outsider and the.
Yeah, there's a big difference, I think, because being a journalist or being an architect, because as an architect you work together on projects trying to find a solution for whatever you are working on. What I have come to see as a big change is the privileged position that we as Western architects had before. You know, being able to have a blue eyes and a big white nose, was able to open doors where they shouldn't actually be opened, because you don't necessarily have something extra or something better to contribute. So we had a huge privilege being Westerner, and that's completely gone. It's not necessarily being a risk now, or being abundant. You know, that's the final step, of course, that they don't need you anymore. But there's like this complete leveraging of what you can do and what you should do, and it's not just basically on what you look like, but what you can actually contribute. That's a big change, and I think it's a very, at least talking as an architect for my profession, it's a very healthy change. Yeah.
I see you nodding, Harry.
Yeah, well, I do recognize some of that, because we were always asked to sit in the front row as Westerners with any kind of opening, like the opening of the. I remember the swimming stadium, with the national swimming stadium with all these bubbles, and then suddenly we were not. We were not even invited, and one of the architects building that building was also not invited. So that was quite a change around.
And maybe also from the other side, because maybe also people from outside of China are looking different to the work you do inside China. John, you wrote in your book the passage on when you were mentioned to be a friend of China, and you were kind of confused to see if that would be a compliment, or that it would be like more like something that you wouldn't want to be called.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing, right? So being a friend in Holland is something completely different than being a friend in China. In China, it's much more like a kind of politeness to open up possibilities or to make something possible. in the future. Whereas in Holland, it's a very rigid kind of concept, and it should be very exclusive to certain kind of people, and you don't use that word in a very easy way. And if you talk like when people in China start to call me a friend of China in a critical context like the Dutch, you're suddenly the kind of spy condition that Harry was talking about first. It makes me Dutch people listening to, this is a friend of China, so maybe he's a spy for China. So it puts me completely in the other position.
Yeah. So a friend, the concept of friendship or friend is a very political concept.
It's one of the cultural concepts that's basically. I'm not going to tell. It's in book 1. That's very unpolite to say.
That's what you discovered in book 1. Oh, I'm not a friend at all.
there are many maybe. It's like a beautiful word. You can hear Jiang Xiaofei still talking about maybe, and maybe in China it can mean yes, it can mean no, and it can mean maybe. But it depends on the context in which it's used. But if you hear maybe as a foreigner, you always think, there's still a possibility. So you keep continuing to. This is just a cultural significance, which is different. Yeah.
And as a journalist, Harry, is it a concept you can play with? That sometimes you can pretend to be a friend, or pose as a friend, or be a friend?
I don't think I have done much of that. I don't think so. But I did play another card, like the gentle old lady from Holland. I did do that, and that has become easier. So that in the second time I was in China was much easier. Like as if I'm kind of innocent somehow, probably do not understand. So I need explanation. So can you tell me? And can you tell me more? And can you tell me more? That I did use. But the whole concept indeed of friendship, it is different. I mean, also in the 80s already. I mean, there was this Beijing hotel that you also know well, I think, and it's had this big banner saying we have friends all over the world, and it meant indeed a very political thing, like we are connected to the whole world, and as friends.
And while becoming aware of that kind of things, because there are many concepts inside the book that touch upon that, culture, for example, or concept like Chinese concept like Feng Shui or Yin Yang, that you have tried to kind of adapt to or understand better to be able to use it within your buildings and in your designs. Could you say a bit more about that? How do those kind of concepts work that we think we understand but we don't?
Yeah, it's very slippery. These kind of because of the first thing you do as a Westerner. As a Western architect, you try to understand the context and you try to translate it into architecture. So I never can make the Chinese way of making feng shui in buildings. I cannot make a building like that. But I can try to understand what's behind the thinking about the energy, the positioning of objects. But if I then translate it into a design, or if we translate it into a design, and I'm very proud showing the Chinese colleagues, we did something very traditional, put it in a modern translated context. And then sometimes I just get messages, come on, John, this is just superstition from the client, and it's just a way of, in a sense, mitigating risk or just believing something that is bigger. But this feng shui expert is telling this, and then I got a Chinese client saying, I studied this for many years, and I totally don't agree with this. So it's very slippery, but it's just one of the guardrails which you maneuver and you try to integrate in your architecture. Yeah.
Harry?
About feng shui and yin yang and accepting these concepts. It's rather a big subject, I must say. But I would say, though, that there are certain concepts that you kind of feel are different. And this whole, like, it has always been what you tell, like almost in the beginning, like you walk into a situation and people want you to build a building tomorrow, and then suddenly they don't want you to build a building tomorrow. And how does this whole process of deciding what's going to happen and when it happens? You talk a lot also about waiting. When should you wait? When should you not wait? This whole concept of what time means, or how you can use time to your advantage, or when is it disadvantage to wait, for instance. Those things are quite different, but also quite hard to grasp. And I think I have simply decided that I will probably not ever understand it, which gives me a nice opportunity to keep on asking.
That's your approach too, John.
I just learned from Gary a lot.
I have one other quote from your book talking about words and about meaning of words, which I liked very much. It's somewhere in the beginning. And the question is, many of the questions that I am posing now are the questions you posed yourself in your book, so that made it really easy for me. But the question was, what is Chinese tradition? And then, so there was a discussion between academics and clients, and you were talking about that. And then someone said that that the Chinese tradition has always been a process of absorbing foreign concepts and ideas. And maybe that Western influence is not so important in Chinese tradition at all, saying in another 50 years, people will no longer even recognize this fusion. What does that mean for you?
It's also a very big question. In trying to figure out the meaning behind this, I came upon a Chinese saying, 'Zhong Ti Si Yong,' which means like there's a Chinese core and there's a Western use. And it originated back to the Qing dynasty, when the West was like with an incredible amount of technology. Just taking over the old empire, and at that time people were thinking, the Chinese people were thinking, we must use this technology also in our advantage, but we cannot change the essence of being Chinese. That's more or less the translation what I got from my Chinese colleagues, and it was a very interesting conversation, because for me it was interesting. What is this Chinese core, right? I can understand the use of Western technology or do something with it, but what is this core that's not allowed to be touched, and what is it in essence? And the quote you're referring to is a design of the National Theatre in Beijing, which was won by a French architect. And what he told as well, it's not only the thing is not only Chinese. This idea of absorbing things and having a culture that is so strong that it eventually just disappears in our own culture. I have a colleague that's talking like this, it doesn't matter if it's foreign, it becomes Chinese anyhow. It's a very interesting guy. But this French architect, André, also says, I designed this building here for Beijing, but in 50 years people are just going to think it's Chinese architecture. And the beauty behind it is that there's no monopoly on an idea, or there's no monopoly on this originates from this place, but it ends up in a kind of hybrid, in a kind of blur that is locally accepted, and something happens with it by the people using it and giving it local significance.
I also have a question, if I may. There you are writing this book, and you are indeed, as has been mentioned by other friends of yours, drinking coffee all the time, drinking enormous amounts of coffee, and also sitting in airplanes all the time. But you do not relax, you do not sit back, you want to write this book. So you put an effort, and you're busy on the book all the time, basically, that you are not busy on your architecture. Then there's this book. What do you want with that book? Why did you want so much to write it?
That's a very good question. Thank you.
She's a journalist.
I think this making a building or making a book they're two completely different kind of things. And I had this urge not only for our office in China to reinvent ourselves, because simply the way we worked, we were thinking, the way we were acting didn't bring anything anymore, or didn't comply anything anymore to the time that was changing all around us. So it is basically trying to find the direction of where should we go the next several years, making like the next 5-year planning for our office, right? Using it in that context. But it's also like a mirror for ourselves. So what have we, because this whole rat race, this whole kind of life that you're describing, makes it very difficult just to stop and look back and take a different kind of perspective on what's going on and where you actually think you should be working or what you should contribute. And the book was just helping for this. And the third one is, and it's not necessarily in this order, is just trying to contribute from our perspective to a world that is, in my idea, just developing in a completely wrong direction. The geopolitical volatility, what we've been talking about. You just open a newspaper and you just see all the messages. You see everything is going bad in China. The real estate industry is collapsing. There's a lot of lying flat generation going on. Of course, it's all true, but it's not completely true, and that's the beauty about China. So if you try to figure out finding common ground, that's the most important word that is on the cover, then you can see that in essence we share this common ground. But the question is not can we cooperate, but the question is how to cooperate. And this book is just our little contribution to.
And are you then happy that we read it, maybe in English, or are you much happier that it might be read in Chinese?
This question has been a long time already in my mind. The most beautiful, ideal situation would be that this book would be translated one-to-one in Chinese. Nothing would be changed. And then it would be a book exactly in between the West and exactly between the West and in China. And then it can potentially really be like a bridge trying to create more understanding. If it's changed in any direction, whether it's Western more critical, it's not critical enough, or you should emphasize this, or if it's changed in the Chinese condition, then I haven't succeeded.
Did you already get any signs of how this will work out in Chinese, and if you will manage to have it published without any changes?
So it's translated into Chinese now, and Jiang Xiaofei, our Chinese partner, is being the editor. He translated the first book as well, and he told me afterwards publicly in a lecture, which just totally flabbergasted me because I was sitting there in the lecture as the only foreigner as well. I translated John's book. Everything was in Chinese, and I only changed 5% of the content.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I was sitting at my chair, like, you changed 5%. Not, why did you do this? But I wanted to know, what is this 5% that I cannot talk about?
Yeah.
And this is an incredibly smart guy. So he just smiled at me when I asked him, what's this 5%? And he told me, well, if your Chinese is good enough, you can find it out yourself. So I'm still page 3 or 4 or something.
But still, did you get a grasp of what type of changes he might have made? It's probably not factual. It's more like in contextual.
It is. So of course, I try to push him, right, and I try to ask more. And he lifted. He showed me some things like. In the first book, I really names people, and that's like a one-to-one situation where people can actually look at, this happened with this professor at that university, and everybody knows who the professor is. And this is something you cannot actually do in a Chinese context. Not in 2012 when the first book was written. So all the names in the first book in Chinese are just anonymous. There's just you cannot relate. If you want to, you can of course relate it back. And that's also the reason why already in the second book it's anonymous. So I already anticipated on this. So the 5% may be less now in this one.
Are there more guesses you have of the things that you feel are maybe the most risky, or that you?
Yeah, there are some topics I'm touching upon, of course. The first book was mainly about architecture, and the second book also is talking about bigger things than architecture, because architecture is becoming much more part of complex systems that it's being determined by. So I'm touching on these topics, and they might be, subtly sensitive.
I have one last question to conclude this part of the evening. Harry, to you, because you've been around in China for so long now, and you know so much about the country. You read this book. Are there things that you thought, okay, I know what this actually means because I know this country, I know the context, but it would be good for the readers to also know what I know while reading this book? Is there something that you would say, keep in mind this, or be aware of, or don't forget that?
Maybe this is related to the question about, like, will it be published in Chinese? I had to think of what a Chinese dissident once told me, a woman. She said, I find it very hard to communicate with you foreign journalists, with you Western journalists, because you always want to get more explicit answers from me. You say, what do you mean? Can you exemplify? Can you say more? If I do that, then I get into trouble in China itself. I cannot live where I live now, so I have to be more subdued. But if, on the other hand, if I am for the Chinese, I might then already be too explicit. So I think this is something you might keep in mind when reading this book, that it searches for a way, I think, to express things that can be expressed in both countries, or both in the West and in China, without leading to it simply not being published in China, I think.
Thank you very much. John, do you have a last question to Gary, now that she's here talking about your book?
I don't know. Can I already announce it? Gary is at the verge of publishing a new book. And my question would be, would you like your book to be translated into Chinese?
I would like to. I would like that, but I honestly do not have that much hope that that will be possible. I think the changes might not be more than 5%, but it would be the 5% that would make it quite difficult to grasp what the meaning of the book would really be. So,
Thank you so much. Gary van Pinksteren. So I hope this has given you all some sort of context of what we are actually talking about when we're talking about reconnecting to China. But of course, it's also interesting to talk about the architecture itself. So we have invited 3 experts that will join us in our conversation with John to talk about that more. And the first is Carolyn Lung. You probably all know her, a founding partner of Superimpose. Please come to the stage, Carolyn. Director and founding partner of international architecture practice Superimpose since 2016, together with Ruben Bergambacht and Ben de Lange. You lived in Hong Kong during your early years, but were educated in the England and in the Netherlands. You have a degree from Delft. You worked at Foster. You were part of the Dutch Pavilion at Guangzhou Design Week. And maybe people in the audience, you might know her work from the Eurostar UK terminal in Amsterdam Central Station. Carolyn Lung.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Carolyn Lung, and I'm one of the co-founder of Superimpose, together with 2 Dutch partners, Ruben Bergambacht and Ben de Lange. Unfortunately, they are not here today. Actually, I can start with my slides, yeah. From what John introduced, your past 20 years in China is kind of reflected back to what we are doing. There are some similarities, but also a lot of differences. I'm not as old as you, but we've been in...
Ouch!
Thank you.
In terms of next architect, our Superimpose only exists for 10 years. That's what I meant. Interestingly, we didn't start in Holland. We started in China together with 2 of my Dutch partners. And can I borrow this?
Sure,
I
sure.
think that would help me. Yes. So you see my 2 Dutch partners. We started in Beijing 2016. We started, actually, we worked in international architecture practice before we started this, in our weekdays, evenings, and weekends. And then we find like a very good opportunity to say, hey, let's start our company. As a Dutch architecture firm, we realized that actually we are not importing Western architecture ideas into China, but over the time, actually, since the first project that we received as an assignment for ourselves, we find out actually we need to build up relationships with the local people, not just the clients, but also the users. So actually the past 10 years, we found out we need to go beyond design. We also need to understand the cultural nuances and also learning how to navigate ourselves if we want to stay in China longer or go back to a Western country. How do we want to develop our architecture? So we dive ourselves into the scenes in different cities, different type of clients, which I will have a very brief cross-section of the clients that we have worked with to showcase our work. Not as if the client represent us, but then it represent the work, how we developed in the past 10 years. So there are 4 main clients, Mr. Chen, Mr. Shen, Mr. Wang, Joseph. They all sounds very similar, but they are very, very different. Let's start with Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen is basically like an individual, idealistic person. He has a very strong idea about how to revitalize the rural urban farming. And he came and invited us, hey, come to my valley, design a tent for 60 kids. We were like, okay, fine, that sounds like a very interesting project. It's not profit making, we are losing a lot of money actually. But as our first project, we gained a lot of awards because he provided us a lot of flexibility, a lot of room to choose our site, develop our idea. So in that sense, he's a client who is open up for leveraging what is economic logic against his ideas. Whereas with Mr. Shen, if you know about China, in the Shaanxi, more like the West China, there's a lot of Meilaoban. Meilaoban, basically, they own a lot of coal mining lands. And Mr. Shen has a lot of land in one of the Shaanxi cities, which we have never heard before we visited. It's a fourth-tier cities. Interestingly, he showed us a master plan. He showed us, this is my land, this is also my plot of land, and gradually he showed us there's 20 plots of land owned by him within the city. And it's a family business, basically, and we also realized how important in China at that moment, it was back in 2016, 2017, that holding the amount of land is actually the most valuable, the most value and profit-making product that you need in China to develop your real estate development. So we are thrown into this big urbanization. And also one thing that is like a side story of this project is a factory renovation. We arrived at the site and there's like a 16-meter road being cut off, cutting off all these factories. And we asked the client, what are you going to do with the factories? And they said, no, we're going to demolish them. We just want to build the road so all the cars can come into this site. And we were like, what happened to the factories? We can revitalize it. We can do something with it. So it's a process that we worked really hard, not just with the client, but also with the local government and understanding the sensitivity of the family business or also the local regulations. When it comes to Mr. Wang, he's the founder of Vanke, which was on the news recently. They were once a very influential real estate developer. So we've been working with them for multiple projects and no longer working with just individuals like Mr. Shen or Mr. Chen, but is an organization that has a lot of systems, a lot of requirements, and also it was a time when weird architecture should not exist. So it's a battle for us to understand what is weird and what is practical and what kind of architecture we should design and build to belong to the local people in different cities. So it's a moment of reflection for us as well, and also how we challenge ourselves to start a project before signing a contract, and perhaps halfway through you don't even get paid and you're still trying to trust your client. So it is a challenge to how our company works, but it's a test of time, of course, and we are still surviving here. And after COVID, that is a very interesting change of moment again. And also it reflects what is happening in China at this moment, which is very much focused on high technology, innovation industry. And we've been working with Huawei. We built one of the flagship stores in Beijing in a very sensitive location in the Wangfujing Crossroad, right opposite to Apple Store. And of course, there's always a mirror and a comment saying that, oh, it's a Chinese style of the Apple Store, which I would say no. But of course, a lot of thoughts and design process going into this project. It reflects also how how, as a company ourselves, not just moving with the economy, but also how China started to influence us. Because we are no longer just working with Mr. Shen, Mr. Chen, but we are also working with this kind of multinational companies, which has a lot of requirements, very high standards, and how they want to elevate themselves, not just beyond China, but also in a more international platform. So we need to look into not just buildings itself, not just design itself, but also how client wants to have their identity in a bigger platform. So to cut it short, the 10 years of practice is not just about the portfolio. I can show you very glossy images, but it's not necessary. But it's a journey for us for the past 10 years, and we are still continuing in China, which a lot of people question why. China is changing. There might be an economic crisis, which is happening everywhere. But why you still want to do your project work with Chinese clients? I have to be honest. It is having our company in Holland 3 years ago help us to build our companies, both China and Holland, much stronger, because there's an exchange of knowledge which doesn't exist in China or doesn't exist in Holland, and we can always exchange daily with our Beijing team. So that's one of the benefits we hold on to. Yeah, as Indira mentioned, 3 years ago we started our second studio in the Netherlands, and we completed the Eurostar UK terminal in the Amsterdam Central Station, which I would also say is because how China, all these projects, how all these clients sharpens us up to open us being more flexible and being more adaptable. So yeah, looking back, this is a very quick flashback of Superimpose. Perhaps later, if you have any more questions, I will answer more. Yeah,
Definitely. Thank you so much for this introduction. We will definitely dive deeper into it. Yes, an applause is very much welcome. Thank you so much. But before going on with the conversation, I would also like to introduce Yang Zhang and Jami Zhu. Please come forward, both of you, because you're both the founding partners. Yes, an applause is a very good idea. Both founding partners of Spring Onion Atelier. Yang is graduated at Berlage in 2015, worked for Kaan, and is currently working at UN Studio. And Jami worked at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam and is now an associate at MVRDV. So both of you have multiple connections to multiple roots, let's say. And then you founded Spring Onion. So please do a short introduction of your office.
Yes. Well, thank you for the introduction. Yes, we could have the.
You want the
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
There you go.
Yes. So actually, three of us founded the Spring Onion Atelier back in 2020, and it was just the COVID time and this perfect moment to isolate and think of what to do next to the full-time job. So three of us started part-time having the Spring Onion. So to prepare this presentation, I also asked three of us to come up with 3 keywords to define us. So the first line actually defines our full-time job: architect in UN Studio, urbanist in MVRDV, and urban strategist in MVRDV as well. But we decide to have a rebellion of our role in our part-time atelier. So we say all the rest of the keywords goes to our passionate part-time atelier. And we're gonna talk about how we want to explore the world with empathy, and also how the food lovers could be a humble listener, facilitate the decision-making process instead of making top-down architecture design. And for me, I'm trying to connecting all the dots in a detective way and to make the story sexier. That's how we define ourselves, of course. In the part-time, in the professional practice, we don't allow you to say that. So what you can see here are all our past experiments. Nothing relates to architecture. That's our, kind of rebellion to the world, saying architects could take a different role than just do the design and make it happen. Because three of us, of course, originally from China, and where the community engagement is always missing. And I think here in Netherlands, we take it very much granted that we always have the design, but with the community engagement as such. So we also take the advantages of being here and saying maybe we can bring something different. What you can see here is we have actually designed urban game to facilitate the process of discussing the food system in Netherlands. At the same time, we also do the installations for the dog walkers, thinking actually walking the dog good with the social integration in the cityscape. At the same time, we do like the placemaking events on the daily basis, both in Rotterdam and Shanghai, and also exhibition designs in China. That's our projects actually practice in China. I think when we talk about the common ground here, we're not only talk about Dutch architects working in China, but on the other way around, we bring China to Europe as well. So I want to share three practices we have with the Spring Onion. So the first one is we introduce a game design together at AHK with students. Basically, we are bringing the Shanghai Lujiazui Central Park here and questioning what is happening and what could be changed. And by designing this role-play game, we basically ask students to imagine you are one stakeholders of the Central Park. You could be a branches or a bird, and it could also be the residents close by or not close by, or tourists actually, to rethink about what the Central Park could actually mean, because in reality it's a fenced Central Park, and it's kind of like decoration, green lawn in the center of the Lujiazui area. On the other side, we're also hosting these kind of workshops in Rotterdam, Chinatown, because I think the migration is coming from our roots, of course, but it's also very relevant when we talking about migrating groups from China actually to Netherlands. So here what we bring this is by having food as the easy access medium, talking about actually the immigrants move together with the food, with the ingredients of the food, how the potato moves to different places and end up the different cuisines. I think it's a perfect metaphor for also for the migrations, how this integration could happen. And by having this one-day event in Rotterdam, Chinatown, actually we want to invite the residents close by to think together what is the possible for the next step, because this workshop actually happens by the period where the geopolitical situation gets very harsh. So I think it's very necessary to have the dialogue with easy access. Similar method has been very well perceived by the audience for our workshop in Rotterdam. So we bring these 3 carpets method also for our project in Placemaking Europe 2025 in Italy. This one we bring more research essence from this, because the carpet, for instance, we talk about the aging, this generic topic, but we bring the gender lenses into this. So the first carpet, we're capturing the statistics for the elderly women's life in statistics in a puzzle, and we're collecting the interviews and observations and collaborating with different organizations from China, from Netherlands, from Italy, and also from the Ethiopia. So it's really like cross different cultural background to make those 3 carpets as a workshop. So I think we're bringing very different methods here today rather than architecture, because we also think it's very, very difficult to translate the social aspects into the space. I think that's what we're trying to do to make a true community engaged process and make those feedbacks to the space design as a possible way.
Thank you so much, Yami. Thank you so much. Very interesting. I really like the idea of, very good. We bring China to you as sort of the project that you've shown really explain. Maybe a question to you, Yang. Is it also possible to bring China within the offices of UN Studio and MVRDV? And if such, how can you do that?
I wonder if it's like bring China or bring like this way of working of cross-culture, because I graduated 2015 from Berlach. My original idea was actually to do an internship here and then go back to China and to start my own studio. That was original idea. And I think when the time passed by, I think the small offices in China just lost a little bit of momentum. It's also at the moment when it's getting really difficult for a small independent office to start. And then you also see in Europe like this whole like the process of architectural design is so mature. You feel this confidence that and respect that you could contribute here. Like I think at the beginning, I wasn't really seeing how I would bring China into Europe, but more as a professional, like a well-educated professional, how to bring my knowledge as an international person in there. After a few years, I now moved to Yun Studio, which is a bit more international comparing to Kang. However, in Kang, we actually also did a Chinese project. It's connecting the roots. But I think now I see it's like this way of working with between internationals, how you can understand different culture. Because as a Chinese, I understand East Asian culture really perfectly, but also I could empathy this, for instance, Turkish culture and even Middle East culture somewhat. I found like some crossroad. Even British culture, I found some similarities comparing to Chinese culture, like in difference with Dutch culture, for instance. So I think it's more in the process. I realized as a person has different roots, then how you can connect the team together. And also, for instance, now we also operate in Middle East, where it's also a little bit a sensitive topic. However, I do see a lot of how, because I started my education at 2008 when let's say a lot of Dutch architects building massively in China, and I grew up hearing the name of Koolhaas and Marvi as well. But I feel like now building in KSA, I feel a little bit of imagining how people were perceiving China back then, I have to say. But as an Asian person, I also feel the connection rooting in this some of the cultural elements. So I think indeed it's like being a person like raised in different culture help you to better reconnect the different culture and build something greater together.
Thank you. Well, John, so we have all these China brought to you, and you're also bringing China to the Netherlands. What does resonate in the presentations of Carolyn and Jami and Yang?
It's a very boring answer because it completely resonates on the right hand side and on the left hand side as well. So this, the beautiful thing is that it's almost like it's starting from an opposite direction. From working from an Asian perspective, working in Holland on a Dutch context with an Asian background, and the other way around for me, of course. I'm just very curious to each and every one of you. So how do you balance these cultural roots in a Dutch cultural context and in a Dutch design context? So are there any limitations to use, or is there any advice like, the Dutch people, you should or you could actually learn from this kind of working or this kind of appreciation or this kind of engagement in order to be able to achieve the goals that you set yourself easier or better or with more quality?
Very good question. First to Spring Onion, and then to Caroline as well. I think you want answers from both sides,
from
right?
Everyone.
Yeah, feed me. Yes. So how do you balance all these cultures?
Wow, good question. I mean, because for myself, working at MVRTV, I've been 8 years involved in the Chinese project. And I think one challenge, if I may, referring to one sentence from John's book I really like, is Chinese people don't like to judge, but to choose.
Yeah.
So taking this as one example, like I have to do the project management and also translating the keynotes from the client to Dutch architect, basically. And it's very difficult to explain then why this design is good enough, but you need to provide another option. And this option cannot be so bad, like so obvious as a B option, but it has to be good enough, but not to be choose. I think these are like culture shocking at the beginning, but very natural to me, of course, since I'm Chinese. So I have to always think of the smart way to translating it. And since I live in the Netherlands for 17 years, so I'm kind of like making these little tricks by just translating them into different way. Maybe you should check with your partner as well. Probably he's doing the same.
I'm sure.
But it's a
That's
5% rule, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of my tricks to balance it out. I think to working in the context and by translating the language, but not the language, but really the reading the air and the context.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult if you add two answers to the same question, right?
No, but probably you have a different way to balance things out because you've also Dutch partners within your own office and then all kinds of clients that are typically and very different in themselves.
Yes. 3 years ago, when my whole company, we started another Dutch studio here, actually my partners feel that there is a cultural shock for them because writing an email to Dutch clients is a task for them because we are so used to WeChat with the client in China. Everything goes so fast. Everything goes a little bit more casual, but very confirmative in China, just through WeChat, while in Holland, everything has to be email written. So that's something as an introduction course for them to understand their culture again. But after 3 years now, I think I understand my Dutch partners better now. They can be quite Chinese in some way, because how we deal with Chinese clients or projects can be quite open, can be quite flexible, and then we put our Chinese cap in the Dutch market. When we deal with Dutch clients, we were like, can we be a little bit more creative with our Dutch clients? Can we do extra steps? Can we do a bit more options? Although more options mean more hourly rate, more time invested, but hey, we can do it. We can be a bit more confident what we can do to deliver to our clients. So I think we are always debating this fine balance. Like in China, we can do multiple options because you need the client to choose. In Holland or in Europe, client just believe in you. Oh, that's a very good option. No one wants to make a decision. Please continue with your design. And then you are like, okay, where's the comments? And you get a little bit skeptical about your design. You are questioning about your design, but actually is another way of sharpening our design thoughts, design process as well. We don't need the clients to criticize us. We need to criticize ourselves in Holland. So I think it's just a very different format of design methodology. So maybe there's some overlapping between how two cultures work. In Holland is behind doors. They don't tell you they like it or not. Where in China, they go around the table for an hour or so, and then you walk out, you thought, oh, they like our design. And I told my partners, no, they don't like our design. We need to work harder. So, it's just the understanding of the culture is so important, and which we are also testing in Holland, how we can use our 10 years knowledge and experience, not to change the Dutch clients, but also just be a bit more innovative, be a bit more creative of how we want to showcase our work, showcase the way of how we design in Holland. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, probably a lot of signs of recognition, right? It's the same for you all the time.
Yeah, but it's a good sign.
It's a good sign. It is. I have maybe it's time to also address the audience who have been listening to all this pile of information and so much angles to look at. But I would really like to open up the floor for questions from anyone from the audience. I think there are microphones. Yeah. Abba is over there. He will come to you. Just raise your hand and the microphone will come to you. I cannot believe this. There must be a question here on the front row.
The first sheep thing. But then I have to look at you. Okay. To everybody here, and I know Sean a little bit because I didn't know that he drank coffee during these meetings, but in this case, from my end, is always thinks that China is a three-dimensional world and Dutch is flat, one dimension. How do you deal with that on the cultural point? And that's a question also for the other ones. who I don't see because he's standing.
And do you mean metaphorically or like in the landscape, 3D and 2D?
No, in the connection to the two worlds that they both work in, because they work from the Chinese side and he works from the Dutch side. So that is how it connects or not connect in many ways.
Question to John or to Spring Onion? Everyone.
You want to start?
Do you want to start?
I think this is the most, like Peter just mentioned, we know each other for a long time, and this is by far the most difficult question you ever asked me.
How would you rephrase this question?
No, don't.
I think that's a good suggestion. Yeah, let's start to rephrase. So the Dutch is like a two-dimensional, and the Chinese is more three-dimensional. I need to write a new book about it. I need to think about this.
Part 3 coming up.
Without a joke, the whole thing is it's not rocket science, right? We are all people, and we all share different kind of things. And the whole idea is that if you get back to the essence of what you're trying to achieve together, it's very well possible. But the beginning starts with the approach. If you start to together with my Chinese partners, I started discovering these hidden dependencies. That's these little gems within our cooperation and within our cultures. Little things I could not understand, little things he couldn't understand, but we needed both of them, regardless of whether they were useful in a project, because we knew the project would get better because of these little things. We needed to keep asking, we needed to keep communicating, to figure out, why does this work? Why is this better, or why isn't this better? And I think you can project it also on a much larger scale. So just first start from the idea that you are always dependent on each other. Like human knowledge, for instance, is not isolated within one person or in one country. It flourishes between countries and between people in relation to the world. So the whole thinking you could isolate it, or you know something more and you want to keep it, in order to be able to be better or to slow number 2 down. This is in fact a quote from my old Chinese neighbor. If you slow number 2 down, you also slow yourself down, which is like brilliant knowledge. Mm-hmm. So regardless of whether we're 2-dimensional, flat, or 3-dimensional, it's all about what we share. And if we start from there, then suddenly the things can happen. I don't know whether this answers your question, but just
well, it's certainly the reason to your book, right? Because I was actually flipping through the last pages of your book where you say something like that, and maybe that's also for Carolyn and for Jam and Jamie to reflect on. That what you mentioned basically is that you need each other to, if you want to find common ground, you need to be able to share knowledge, to open up, to really try and understand, and then layer by layer, as you described yourself, lay a new foundation to actually get somewhere together in the future, which is basically the end of this book, towards book number 3, probably. Do you recognize something like that, Carolyn? How to? So we were talking about balancing cultures, but it's also about how you share knowledge, how you keep on an open attitude to actually understand each other and to work from there.
Yes, definitely. I think also especially in China, it is no longer. I have to say, for the past 5 years, we started to try to define ourselves what kind of architects we are. We are not. Let's say we are not star architects anymore. We are not. We don't want to be star architects. We actually want to be architects who can build or design buildings which actually belongs and being functional, especially in China, let's say in the context of China, because at the end, people who use it will not recognize, hey, this is from Dutch architects, like at the end, they care about whether this is enough square meter for me or not, what kind of facilities are there, is it the place for me to be, So I think we need to always question ourselves what kind of architect we want to be, and how we want, to achieve by listening to our client, listening to who we want to be as an architect, not being drifted away. What is the trend of architecture supposed to be? So if you look at our work, it's all very different. Every project is very different. So we want to design buildings which are belonging to the place itself. Yeah, so I don't know if I answer your question.
Does
but,
it also work towards innovation?
Yes, innovation, it can be in different aspects. Innovation in Holland, in Europe, is very different to innovation in China again. But there can be exchange. So, for example, there's a lot of circular topics going on in Holland. Every project needs to have certain percentage of circular materials, etc. But whereas in China, not actually. They are looking at the bigger picture, how many solar panels are installed on the roof, and then they take away after the opening, you know. So tick the box, get a WELL certificate, you know. But we want to introduce what we learned from Holland. Hey, there's this new material. Whether it can pass the fire regulation in China, maybe not. But we need to keep asking these questions. What can we introduce in China to be more innovative in our projects in China? Not to become a star architect, not to design something super spectacular, like Instagrammable, but something that is more sustainable, more usable, more belongs to the people. So in terms of innovation, I think there's an exchange of conversations daily with our Chinese team. Even our Chinese team will be curious about what we use in the Eurostar terminal. And we are curious what is available in China, because there's a lot of things going on in China. If you don't go there, you don't know. So yeah, there's always this exchange of culture and reconnection in different levels, in different perspective in a project, not just a design perspective.
Yeah. Maybe because we're running slightly out of time, but it's also interesting. 2 more questions from the audience, and then go towards a wrap-up. It's getting hot here as well, right?
There's a question here.
Please don't shy away from asking questions, because here they are and they know so much.
I have a small question. Maybe it's more related to John, but actually to everybody. In the first period, before they announced, don't make any weird buildings anymore, you designed that museum for the roses, right? There was a period when star architects and iconic building images was very relevant. And I remember also from working there, it's not about judgment, but you have to give options. They want to choose. But now you've gone back to more the roots, maybe, of architecture, being more sustainable, and asking yourself, and your office asking yourself, what's really meaning, and what would we like to contribute next to that iconic image? If now you would design that museum again, have to present some options to the client, what would he choose? Would he choose that sexy, iconic building, or the building in where you can explain that it has to deal with more deeper layers of cultural understanding and the sustainability, and more incorporated into the local context? I find it, I don't know the answer, that's why I'm questioning it. I know there is this difference in how clients perceive your architecture, what you can do as an architect. Hence this maybe difficult question.
We only have difficult questions today, I'm afraid.
It's lovely, and it's a brilliant question. And the only honest answer is that the building, if we would have the same assignment now, would look completely different. So this is just and it's not about legacy, about what we did at a certain time and what we designed, and whether it was spectacular enough or landmark enough, or just what Carolyn was talking about. It's about, in fact, it's all about relevance. And relevance is something that is connected to what is important at a certain point in time, at a certain place. And sometimes it's incredibly difficult to convince clients to make it like a holistic, sustainable building. Because, you know, I was smiling what Carolyn was just saying, and of course we also know these clients that are very flexible with the idea of designing sustainable. But things are actually, and that's my experience, changing. Seeing the youngest generations of young architects in our office, for instance, that are just completely refusing the idea of throwaway architecture, you know, like instant architecture, or they're really busy with how can we design something that is not only contributing to to economy, but also to to social things, to all different kind of things that we are actually are identically working on in a Dutch context. The contexts are completely different, of course, but the themes that are working behind there are identical. So this whole era of spectacular, superlatives, it's completely gone, and it won't return.
Thank you. One more question? No questions? Okay, then I maybe have a final question to all of you. To look towards the future, you already said, well, the future is in your book. It's about finding common ground. It's about trying to understand, learning from each other, and from there experiment, innovate, and make a better world, of course. But I was wondering, with all these confusion on what things mean and what roles are and how cultures work, how would you define future-proof?
Just gonna start
within the context of this evening? And the question is for all of you, so you have time to think. John has a kind of a head start because you wrote the whole book, and you mentioned the problem yourself. So
starting the evening all over again with this question.
Yes. Okay, so future-proof within the cultural relationships between China and the Netherlands.
I think that just to give it I've been talking so much already, just try to give it a brief answer, that we should, from both sides, should try to find the capacity to allow change and to find things, because you're working on the same kind of thing, sharing in essence the same kind of common ground that we actually share, is to start from difference and not start from the overlap or the things you agree upon. Because if you agree on things, nothing interesting is happening. Interesting things start from differences. And the question is how to translate these differences to something that's useful in both contexts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Spring onion.
Jan, do you want to start? It's a difficult question.
Difficult question, but your advantage is you're working more on social relationships and not on buildings, probably, at least from Spring Onion Atelier.
I think, well, first of all, I think future is unknown, and that's my personal belief, of course. And to be honest, I would borrow some Chinese spirit, like to design something future-proof. In China, probably John is familiar, you design before you have the brief. I think that's the brief we have right now when we want to design a future-proof building. We don't know what is future, so we're speculating the future while writing our own brief, while we're designing it. That's where all those different cross-boundary or discipline knowledge is very necessary to discuss what could be the future we want to bring and to write our own brief.
Thank you. It has become such a philosophical evening all the same, right? So much new insights in ourselves and who we are. Carolyn, for you?
I think is being critical about what we are doing. Critical in the sense that do we need to build more? Do we need to accept the assignment? Is it something that is closer to our hearts? And is it a project that is only for profit making? So it doesn't contribute any additional value to the people or the people who are using it. So it's always a battle when you are having your own company. Should we take this project? Is it essentially a very important project for us, or for the economy, or for the people? So I think it's always very difficult to navigate this. But I think being critical and not accepting everything that comes into our path and value for the projects that we think this is something that is closer to our heart. I think that's one step that we can do as architect.
Thank you so much. And I think then we are back to the core business of being an architect, right? In this world as well. So thank you so much, everybody. Carolyn, Yami, John, everyone, Harry, Abe, all the audience. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to know all the answers, it's in this book, but actually also in this book. And if you buy this one, you get this one for free. Did I understand that correctly? Okay, well then go and buy and talk and try and find out more about yourselves in relation to China and the Netherlands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Indira.